welcome to BMIT series on the Digital Operational Resilience Act, or as better known in the industry, DORA. DORA, which comes into force in 2025, is a piece of legislation that targets the financial services sector. However, its principles of IT governance, risk management, cybersecurity, and resilience building are crucial topics for every business in today's digital age. However, before we can talk about IT governance, risk, building resilience, the importance of a security culture within the organization is probably one of the first things that a business needs to start focusing on. Cultivating what we call a security-first culture, which means that everything that we do, every approach, there is always a consideration of security. And to look into this very interesting topic, I have Galea, BMIT's product manager, and Cyrille Aubergier, who is the senior GRC specialist at BMIT. Thank you both. This should be quite an interesting conversation. Security first culture. Cyrille, what do we mean by a security first culture?
I think we should, it's all about knowledge and training. I will say that we should put human first. I mean, vendor propose some security solutions, but sometimes sold as magic. The thing is, if the security solution is not properly installed, used, monitor, it doesn't protect. It gives a fake feeling of security. So let's train people. Let's be sure people are properly using the security tools. Technical solution exists in most of security incidents. This is because we had a human error, human mistakes, that it happened. One example is, we hear the news, a lot of service that has been compromised because they didn't enable the multi-factor authentication. Technology exists. Let's use it properly. And it starts with education and training and awareness session.
Yeah, the humans are the first line of defense, right?
At the first line of defense, and also responsible of 95-99% of incident.
There's always a human element in an incident.
I totally agree. They can be sometimes exploiting some services, but mostly this is because of human, adversarial or accidental.
And I think this is where the concept of culture. So what is a culture? It is basically how we want to do things. So the challenge here is, if we look historically, for use of a better word, the way the IT team look at other people within the organization. So I'm the IT guys, these are the employees, they have no idea about IT. So there is this looking down at employees. And then you have the employees looking at the IT people and saying, we're not dumb, but it just doesn't help to foster the sense of a security culture. So you mentioned training, the importance of training. But do you think that training should not just be for end users? It should be for the IT teams, the IT people, to help them also understand that whilst employees may not be security experts or hackers, they still have the ability to be, if I mentioned, the first line of defense. And if you have a strong first line of defense, the chances are that your other lines are going to be protected. So how do you start instilling a culture in an organization, a security culture?
I agree with your comment that sometimes IT guys, security guys should adapt to the other entities of the company, the way they're speaking. But the solution also have to be usable. It has to be usable by everybody. If you put in place some strong procedure and process, people will bypass it, won't do it, won't learn it. So I totally agree that IT security should explain better and should give example. But there is something that is changing is when you educate employee, when they receive an email, to ask themselves the question, is it expected? Should I receive this email? This is the same question they should have at home. I mean, the problem that we're asking for the employee to protect the data of the company is the same at home.
It's hammering that information in the employee, right? In the cybersecurity imperative conference, we talked, and there was one speaker, our Dione Vella, and he was getting an example of crossing the road. We are taught at a very young age, and throughout our life, that you need to look left and you need to look right, and it's sort of hammered in our brain that when you come to a crossing, you're gonna look left and you're gonna look right. I mean, it becomes, part of our
second nature.
Yeah, second nature. Yeah, exactly. So it becomes natural, and that's what we need to do with security. When they receive an email, the employees, at least there is an element of suspicion within that email. They need to stop and think. They need to think, is this expected? Is this real? What can I do to check? Let me, investigate a little bit further. Ask, get a second validation. We see a lot of, and we're talking about business email compromise. Yeah, and we see a lot of emails, even for within our organization. Everybody gets an attack, means a business email compromise, right? And they try to manipulate for example, a sense of urgency. They try to play with the emotions of that employee, yeah, and they put that sense of urgency as well. And for some employees, maybe those who are, stressed already, they are busy, they tend to ignore the flags, yeah, and they pass it on. And who do they attack? They don't attack always the small guy. They go for the big guys. They go for the CEOs, the ones who are busy. They go for the chiefs. They pass it on to their employees, to their managers, and so on. And then it's coming from the CEO. It's urgent. That's the reality.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
Totally right. Something that helps on the culture is we all know a company that has been compromised around. But even at home, we all have a friend that click on a link that allows money or lose that.
Yes,
So we know
exactly.
we all know stories. So that helps also to protect themselves.
So it also brings up the importance. Ivan mentioned whaling attacks, invoice scams, targeting the senior members of the organization. Well, what's interesting is, whilst they tend to go for other employees, the executives are targeted not only because they maybe have more interesting data, more valuable data, more a valuable response, but it's also because they assume that senior management does not know about security. So they also, whilst leadership should drive a security culture in the organization, the executive team, management, the board should also be the ones who are trained in the security culture to be able to instill the security culture within the rest of the organization. Because as we talk about risk management or IT governance, if it doesn't start from the top, if the senior leadership does not understand security, they cannot expect to instill a culture if they don't have that culture? And how difficult is that, Cyrille? Is that a challenge in organizations today?
That's a challenge to involve the management to adhere to the policy. And I will give you an example that match almost all the company. You have your standards saying that everybody should have a window machine with an antivirus, encryption, backup, etc. But you still have chief that's using Apple. I mean, this is an example I saw a lot of time. A lot of time. To come back to the previous point, there need also to be tested, phishing attempt, practiced phishing test. If you're not doing it, the criminal will do it without any limitation, without any vacation, without any budget issue. They are doing it now. And this is ongoing. So doing phishing test also to the chief.
I don't think that, to be honest, I don't think that because they're chiefs or board, they should be excluded. I think all the organization needs to be part of the awareness program. And this is what DORA is implicating within their legislation, is that they're not only responsible, they are responsible to oversee as well the awareness program. They need to instill that culture. They need to not just implement, they are. I mean, let's face it, they are the most actually attacked employees within an organization. It's a given.
So we're mentioning training. Now there are various ways. You can have computer-based training. You can have phishing simulation exercises. You can have one-day webinars. But are those effective? So one-off training, how effective is that in building a culture? How effective is it in actually getting people to change the way they do things? So what type of training is expected within an organization in this case?
Of course, generic training are important on the generic domain and subject. But if you can provide some specific training, it's even better. With specific example to this company, using specific past incident, showing this is what happened. Especially if you don't suffer an incident in past year, it's good to do ongoing, to do recurrent training.
So tailored and repeated.
Yes, because sorry to interrupt, because technology change, the way to use the process change, and criminals are innovative. So, and also because there is plenty of things to learn, the code of conduct, the security policy, the incident management. So all this should be repeated to be sure that this is known, and you should have a quiz following this training to be sure that people remember the key things of we want them to remember.
I would say striking a balance. The organization need to strike that balance, because you don't want to overwhelm the employee either. You're giving them training modules all the time, month on month, etc. But at the same time, you want to keep that security, foster that security, and keeping on top of mind for these employees. So there are ways and means to do it. Try to making it more interesting, not boring for the employees. Reading a policy or doing reading through a module, etc., can be a bit tedious, and therefore it becomes even we mentioned the employee security awareness training, one-off training, that becomes a tick box exercise. It's not really. You're not getting anything out of it. It's just ticking a box. You want to keep it recurring. You want to always keep it fresh. At the same time, you don't want to have a heavy cost on productivity for the employees. So there are elements such as gamification of this training. Yeah, making a fun exercise out of it, a physical exercise or whatever. There are ways and means to do it.
And this training should explain the impact. People are not stupid. If you do that, this is the consequences. If you click on this is the possible consequences. People are not stupid. Let's explain why they need to learn what they need to use this process.
Storytelling is also a good effective. Nowadays, they want to hear about, you mentioned it, they want to hear about examples. They want to understand what are we talking about, because we say spearfishing. For them, spearfishing is like going fishing for fish. It's not really, you know what I mean? You have to put a use case to it and how it can impact the entity, the organization. So putting a real life scenario for these employees will make it a little bit more valuable to them. At the same time, you can put some fun and interesting into it and not making it boring.
And you also reduce the resistance to change. People find it hard to change. They find it hard to accept change within an organization. And if they see that these training exercises are trying to change them, because there's one thing helping them to change the way they do things, and it's another thing enforcing that change on them. So, Cyrille, how do you see the type of training as being effective in reducing resistance?
I agree that there always resistance and people don't like change, whatever change, but they are more and more affected. And like we explained earlier, you can touch them at home, to touch the family. And so this is why there is less and less resistance. But if you find a way to explain the story, the impact, gamification of the training, and have a real example. This is what happened 3 months ago. We received this. Someone click on this. So without giving the name of who did the mistake, but showing the real example really helped.
It's not about putting the employee on the spot. That's one thing that you want to avoid doing. It's not about punishing the employee. You want to actually give the employee the power, so to speak. Give them the power to speak up, right? Even if they made a mistake. You don't need to, if you put fear in them, right? They're going to be less likely to tell you, I clicked on that link. You want them to speak up, because at the end of the day, the sooner you find the event, the sooner you find the incident, the more leverage you have to respond.
And the impact will be bigger.
Yeah, it would be bigger.
Report
Yes,
as soon as
agreed.
possible. The impact can be even worse. If since the beginning, we can start to mitigate.
So empowering the employee is crucial, I think. It's very important, to be honest.
I think we're talking about employee. I think there's also an element of change also within the IT teams. If we're looking at very small organizations where you may have 1 or 2 people managing the systems, managing the network, they are often primarily the sysadmins who are focused on configuring their routers, configuring a switch, setting up their PCs, but they also don't often have that security training or that security mindset. So there's an element of training and culture also for them. I mean, BMIT also do a form of blue team training for IT people. Why? Because it helps them to understand where threats are coming from, how they could be targeted, how they need to also understand
How can they protect as well?
where they need to change. Their culture needs to change.
That's the fun, because you're just watching your dashboard and waiting for the guys to attack so you can see if you can spot them. Now that's a nice exercise.
So so what we're saying here is ultimately when you're doing training for your organization, now be it compliance with DORA, be it ensuring that your organization is resilient, forward-looking, training across the organization is critical, it is necessary, and it should not be ignored any longer. The longer companies ignore training, the greater the risk they face for an incident, of a breach, of data loss, or whatever.
There's an element of measuring as well. I mean, the company needs to, first of all, find the right balance, right? And as well measure the effectiveness of that awareness program. And ensuring that the employees know about the consequences, right? The risks that could possibly impact the business. It's important without punishing the employee. So that is something where you need to find the balance.
Cyrille, last point, who should be responsible for this training?
Management should show the example and engage the training program that they could test.
I think it depends on the entity really, because the management are responsible to oversee, to provide budget, develop the awareness program, but they also need to delegate somebody, in my honest opinion. For example, we've seen entities who HR take on that responsibility to organize the training. We see operations who take responsibility. It really depends on the entity who's going. But at the end of the beginning starts from management. Yeah, they need to provide, delegate, and it's the top-down approach again, right?
Perfect. Thank you very, very much, both of you. That was very interesting. Thank you, Cyrille.
Thank you.
Ivan.
Thank you.
Thank you.